right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mindgasms. So, today, as you can see on the screen and from the title, obviously, I'm going to talk about Deleuze's idea of the plane of immanence. And obviously, as you can see, it has to do with Plato's realm of forms or realm of ideas and Alfred North Whitehead's idea of an immanent God rather than a transcendent God. And so I guess to start off with, I will talk about Deleuze a little bit here. So I'm going to show you a picture of Deleuze, and he was basically a French philosopher who was also a Marxist, but his philosophical writing that I've read has basically nothing to do with Marxism, other than one of his books that I have not yet read called Capitalism and Schizophrenia, which I am interested to read, even though I obviously am not a Marxist myself. But anyway, so here is what Deleuze looks like there, typical French intellectual guy. And so basically, like I said, this is his idea. His idea is the plane of immanence. And I forgot to mention, he also basically was often associated with post-structuralism, even though he himself was not necessarily actually a post-structuralist. And if you don't know what post-structuralism is, that's basically response to the structuralism that was a set of ideas that formed during the Enlightenment, and it's basically, the idea that societies are based on structures and they need structures to function, like institutions, like government and religion. And it also kind of relates to not exactly, because they're different types of philosophical ideas, but it's a little bit similar to Plato's idea of the realm of forms, because that's the idea of a structure. And so I guess what I'll talk about next is, I guess I should talk about Plato would be a good idea to go to next. So I'll wait just a second here. Oh yeah, no, there is a picture of Plato here. So let me see here. So here is a picture of Plato. You've probably seen what he looks like before, like that, or like statues, like you can see up here, like a statue of his face there. And obviously he's like a famous Greek philosopher, and he's famous for also writing the dialogues about Socrates from the perspective of Socrates. And of course, there's a little bit debate among historians and philosophers as to whether Socrates actually existed or he was just a character that Plato created in order to explore his ideas in the form of his dialogues that he wrote. So basically, among many others, one of Plato's ideas was his realm of forms. And I'm going to show you the definition here that I looked up. It's basically his realm of forms was the idea, and I'll just read it to you here. Plato's forms, such as beauty, and obviously there are other forms too, like um, you know, I was gonna say virtue, but forms like beauty, maybe like intelligence, or the form can be any idea really. But anyways, forms such as beauty are more real than any objects that imitate them. Plato's Socrates held that the world of forms is transcendent to our own world. the world of substances, and also is the essential basis of reality. Superordinate to matter, forms are the most pure of all things. Okay, so basically, to get into that a little bit more, what he's talking about is that the forms are real than the objects that imitate these forms. So there are these forms, like beauty, for example, and then, the form of beauty can turn into a beautiful woman or a beautiful man or a beautiful piece of art. And so in Plato's dialogues, he has Socrates hold the position that Plato has this idea of the world of forms and it's transcendent. So basically, it's like this realm that is above you that you can't access, like the idea of a transcendent God, kind of like God is, we can't experience it directly. And so it's like the realm where ideas, the forms or structures of ideas come from, like beauty, or maybe another good one would be love, like the form of love. It could be like it could be manifested as a mother's love for her child, or like you love your girlfriend or boyfriend. Um, and so it's the essential basis of reality. This is how reality is created. There are these structures, or the realm of forms, that create everything living. Like the let's say the form or the idea of life can turn into a person or a tree or any other living thing. And so these are the most pure of all things. So basically, I think I had looked up transcendence here too, to more clearly define that as well, but let me double check here. Oh yeah, transcendence within the context of religion. So I'll just read this here too. In religion, transcendence is the aspect of a deity's nature and power that is wholly independent of the material universe, beyond all known physical flaws. This is contrasted with immanence, where God is said to be fully present in the physical world and thus accessible to creatures in various ways. In religious experience, transcendence is a state of being that has overcome the limitations of physical existence, and by some definitions has also become independent of it. This is typically manifest, or that part isn't important. Psychedelic visions and paranormal visions, like that can be a transcendent experience. I guess that is a good example. Like if you eat mushrooms and you have like an amazing psychedelic experience, it feels like your mind is transcending your body and you're accessing this other realm that you didn't have access to before. Whether that actually happens or not is debatable, but it sure feels that way, I can say from my personal experience. And then there are religious transcendence experiences too, according to religious people. So basically, that's like I said. So if we're applying a transcendence to Plato's forms, because they are transcendent, um, similar to the idea of God. So these that means that the realm of forms, these forms are independent of the material universe. They're above it and outside of it, which makes them transcendent, right? And like I said, beyond our perception, basically. And then this gets into the alternative to that, which is immanence, which is sort of the opposite, which is basically God. Like we have access to God, we can communicate with God. So similar to that, um, basically with the realm of forms, Plato comes up with the idea of the plane of immanence instead. And basically that's well, actually, I guess before I get into that, I'll talk a little bit about the idea of transcendence in terms of a transcendent God, and then that's easier to be able to contrast it to an immanent God. And I'll tell you about the idea of an immanent God too. But basically, in terms of transcendence, the idea is that God, and we can say this with Plato's realm of forms, a realm of ideas too. So gods, or let's say ideas, and the structures of reality, a lot of you've heard a lot of people say this about that idea of a transcendent God, that God is omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent, right? So I'm going to screen share all of these here. So this is omnipotence, for a lot of you do know, I'm sure, but for those who don't know, um, that means like having unlimited power, able to do anything. The quality of having unlimited power and potential. Monotheistic religions generally attribute omnipotence only to the deity of their faith. So but basically, Plato is applying that to his realm of forms, a realm of ideas, right? So basically, that means that, it's this idea that God is all powerful. And then, so, wait, did I close that? No. Omniscient, that's omnipotent, right? Yes, all powerful, having unlimited power. Okay, so let's see. In terms of which one am I going to go to next here? Omniscience or omnipresence? Let's see here. Let's go with, well, omnipresence kind of self-explanatory in a way, right? So it's basically like existing everywhere at once. Widely or constantly encountered, common or widespread, like ubiquitous, basically. Yeah, omnipresence or ubiquity is the property of being present anywhere and everywhere. So obviously, it's this idea that God is always everywhere. You can't escape God, right? So it's that idea. And then, so if we get into the idea of omniscience here, you probably kind of get where this is going with omnipresence and omnipotence. Omniscience is knowing everything. So it's this idea of God being all knowing, right? So if we again apply these ideas to Plato's forms, it's Plato's putting forth the argument that these ideas are like, they know everything, so they have access to all information all the time, and they exist everywhere. So they are everywhere all the time, and they're all powerful. So since they're the structure of ideas and our thoughts and reality, they control the way that reality is manifested and our existence is manifested, right? So then we can get into Alfred North Whitehead here and his idea of an immanent God rather than a transcendent God, which leads us to the idea of the plane of immanence rather than Plato's realm of forms. Okay, so here is a picture of Alfred North Whitehead, 1861 to 1947. All right. And then I'm going to go here to his idea of an immanent God. So I'm going to screen share this here too. And we know what transcendence is, right? Like all powerful, like all of these qualifications: omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent, and this is a transcendent God, right? So then let's look up the plane of immanence here. Okay, so founding concept in the metaphysics of ontology. So ontology, that's how we define reality. It's different from epistemology and how we know things, right? So ontology is like what exists. That's why we can say plane of immanence rather than the realm of forms, because it's like what is real and how reality exists, basically. And that's why it's applied to metaphysics, because transcendence is an aspect of metaphysics, because it's what you're speculating about what is above your perception, and it gets into theology with God, of course, and then we apply this to Plato's realm of ideas, and then and then Deleuze's plane of immanence here. So the ontology of French philosopher Gilles Deleuze, I'm probably mispronouncing it, immanence, meaning existing or remaining within, generally offers a relative opposition to transcendence, like I said. That which is beyond or outside of our perception. So it's a founding concept of the metaphysics of his, existing or remaining within. So basically, it's this idea that instead of God being outside of our perception, if we're talking about Alfred North Whitehead's idea of an immanent God, I'm going to look that up specifically here and then go back to the plane of immanence, because I probably am getting a little bit ahead of myself here, and I should explain what an immanent God is before I explain the plane of immanence fully. So let's go here to an immanent God. And remember, this is Alfred North Whitehead, and he was I forgot to mention, he was a mathematician and philosopher, and he also is famous for coming up with this theological idea of process theology about how you define God as a process, which is, again, I don't believe in God because I'm an atheist, but I think this is an interesting way of looking at God. So anyway, according to Christian theology, the transcendent God, who cannot be approached or seen in essence or being, becomes immanent primarily in the God-man Jesus Christ, who is the incarnate second person of the Trinity. So that relates to how obviously Jesus is the manifestation of immanence. But if we apply this to, I guess I didn't look that up exactly, but I can explain it here. So what an immanent God is exactly is obviously the opposition to transcendence, right? So instead of God being omniscient or all-knowing and knows everything, God does not know everything. God has limited information, and instead of God being present everywhere, God is only present in one place at a time. God can't be everywhere at once. And omnipotent means God is not all powerful. And the most interesting aspect of this to me, of Alfred North Whitehead's idea of an immanent God, is that God can change. God is not eternal and unchanging. This monotheistic religious idea of this God the Father, the anthropomorphized God, this this old guy with a white beard in the sky. That whole thing is stupid to me. Even if I were, for argument's sake, like a religious person or a Christian or something, I would think that idea is stupid. But like I said, I'm not anyway. But anyway, I like this idea because it's it's the idea that God is just not this like king in the sky who controls everything and knows everything and has power over everything. It's this idea that, like I said, the most interesting aspect of this to me, of course, that Alfred North Whitehead talks about is that God can actually be changed. Like I said, God is not eternal and unchanging. And it's even the case that you can change God just as much as God changes you. So, God is, in this idea of God, it's interacting with the world and interacting with people, and God is, I'm deliberately not using gendered terms just because I think applying the idea of a gender to something like God doesn't make sense to me anyway, and is stupid regardless of what gender you want to apply to it. I don't really care. But anyway, so God can be changed like we can influence God. And this makes a little more sense too, because it answers the theological question that has been one of my own atheist criticisms of religious people like Christians or others before, that this idea of this is a classic argument against God, for example, if God is all powerful and all knowing, then why would he allow things like the Holocaust to happen, right? And then, like, the dumb response of people to this is it's all part of God's plan, which, like, God shows how fucking brutal God is, or how brutal your perception on reality is, in my opinion. If you can say, oh, the Holocaust was okay because eventually it'll balance out because God will reward us and be good and shit. No, that's fucked up, even if that's actually the fucking case, right? So anyway, um, God can't stop things like the Holocaust, perhaps, in this idea, because God doesn't have enough power to do that. All it can do is like influence humans. So it's a little bit like this idea of deism, right? This idea that God created the world and then stepped back and doesn't interfere with events. It's different from that, though, because even deists, if I remember correctly, believe that God is transcendent. So it created the world and then removed itself from the world, and we can't access it, which is how it doesn't interfere with anything, right? So in this idea is that we still can have access to God and God can change, but it also doesn't have the power to do absolutely everything or anything, and it can only be in one place at once, so it can only deal with one problem at a time, and it um and it doesn't know everything. It needs to learn, like God learns and changes its mind based on learning new information. So I really like this idea of an immanent God, because it's this idea of a God is much more human. It kind of reminds me of like really old ideas of God, like Greek gods, because they're really human, because they're really flawed, and they're lying and cheating and fucking each other over all the time, and betraying each other, and even starting wars with each other sometimes. And Zeus is always like cheating on his wife and having all these bastard sons and stuff. And it's more interesting to me that way, since I view all of these theological ideas as like fiction, and since I'm not a militant atheist anymore, I actually like exploring these because they're interesting. If you just like look at them as fiction, as I do anyway, right? And even if you are a religious believer, I think it's interesting to explore new ideas about this, if you are interested in that sort of thing, right? So anyway, so with this idea of an immanent God, of course, Deleuze applies that idea of Alfred North Whitehead to the plane of immanence, right? So, like I said, I'm going to show the definition that I pulled up here before again, because I think it'll be a little easier to understand now that I've explained the concept of an immanent God. So, plane of immanence, like I said, um, is a founding concept in the metaphysics or ontology of Gilles Deleuze. Immanence, meaning existing or remaining within, generally offers a relative opposition to transcendence, that which is beyond or outside, or beyond or outside our perception, right? So again, you're aware. I told you about what transcendence means, and I just told you about what immanence means. So basically, like, this idea of existing or remaining within is kind of like God is within us, but it's not like God is everywhere all the time, because God is not omnipresent. It's that we can access God and change God, and we can change it as much as it changes us. So again, if we look at this in terms of Plato's forms, and take out the idea of transcendence and replace it with immanence, that means if we look at these ideas like omniscience, omnipresence, and omnipotence, so that means that the plane of immanence works differently in terms of the realm of ideas. So I'm going to go back through all three of these here: omniscience, omnipresence, and omnipotent, and contrast those, apply the ideas of immanence to all three of these definitions here. So omniscience, knowing everything. So then obviously the opposite of knowing everything is not knowing everything. So God is not all knowing, all wise, all seeing. So in terms of the Plato's realm of ideas and Deleuze's plane of immanence, instead of the realm of ideas basically being all knowing and having access to all information, or the realm of ideas or the realm of forms. So the structure of reality and the structure of ideas, like basically having access to all information all the time, which allows the ideas to be that concrete in the plane of immanence. So these ideas do not have all the information, and the ideas change as they accumulate new information, which is why they need to change, because they don't have all of the information. And when you learn new information, you know what changes you need. And I think this is a better idea, because it's like reality can improve and be changed based on new information. It's almost like a scientific way of looking at reality, right? Like you learn new information and you change accordingly. So that makes sense, right? So omniscience. So let's look at omnipresence and omnipotence, and look at that in terms of the plane of immanence here. So let's look at omnipotence. Okay, so having an unlimited power, able to do anything. Okay, so in terms of the realm of forms, that means that the realm of forms, or Plato's realm of forms, or realm of ideas, in the plane of immanence, the ideas or forms have limited power. So again, the structure of reality and the structure of our ideas and thoughts can change based on new information, like I said, right? Because the structure of reality and the structure of our ideas and thoughts is not powerful enough to always be changing. So it's a little bit like, it's not rigid, it's a little loose. It can be straight, it can be flexed and bent and moved in all sorts of ways, in order to be improved when we know more about how to improve reality, right? So that makes more sense too in terms of the plane of immanence. Okay, and then again, the most obvious one of those is omnipresence. And then again, if we apply that to the plane of immanence, what that means is, so that means that in terms of the plane of immanence, the structure of reality and the realm of ideas of our thoughts they're not all the same everywhere. They're not everywhere at once. So like this aspect of the structure of reality, or this idea, thought cannot be everywhere at once. Not everyone can have the same thought at once, or the same revelation at once, or something like that. People think differently. People have different thoughts, and reality is different depending on where you go, and it's always changing. Again, this is more realistic, right? So yeah, anyway, I really love this idea of Deleuze's idea of plane of immanence, and I think it's way better than Plato's idea of the realm of forms or the realm of ideas. Like, it's more realistic, right? To me, it's more true. Like, the structure of reality and our ideas and thoughts are changing all the time, because reality is not conscious, but as reality accumulates new information, it changes. That's how evolution works, right? The organisms adapt to the environment, and the environment changes, and then the organisms and life and reality and the earth and the universe, they change. There's an endless process of change, because the environments are changing, like the structure of the universe is always changing, and the structure of reality is always changing, and things are different everywhere throughout the universe depending on where you go. And like, I would say we don't know how powerful the structure of the universe is. Like, physics is always learning more and more about this, but to me, I'm no expert in physics, but the more we learn, the more we find out we have no fucking idea what the structure of reality actually is. So I think that's a healthy mind and more realistic mindset to have too. So anyway, I know this is a really like complex philosophical idea, but I just love this idea, so I wanted to really dive deeply into it. So anyway, thanks to everyone for watching this deep dive philosophy video on this awesome idea of the plane of immanence. Hashtag immanence, not transcendence. Transcendence sucks. Deleuze destroyed Transcendence with his plane of immanence, and whether you're religious or not, this idea of an immanent God is way more interesting than the idea of a transcendent God. And yeah, anyway, so thanks for watching again, everyone. Thanks to those of you who comment on this video. So please subscribe and click that bell to be notified whenever I come out with new videos if you haven't done so already. And thanks especially to those of you who contribute to me on Patreon, and I'll post the link for my Patreon page in the description of this video, as I always do. And look forward to more chats soon.